Hello everyone, welcome back to part 3 of my two-part series where I make Minecraft in Godot in a day. Okay, this has turned out to be a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I made Minecraft in my part 1 video. I then took an extra month after I made it and turned it into a unit test, or I guess maybe not a unit test, but I'm using it as a benchmark at least. So this is what I had running. And this, as you can see, is currently in Godot 4. I'm going to do a quick video here to talk about that upgrade. I kind of reached out to the community and was asking, hey, what interesting things would you want to see as I'm upgrading, questions or maybe some myth busting in Godot 4? And the big response I got was, hey, how does the upgrade work? What are the pitfalls? So I'm doing this as a standalone video, but I am going to be coming back and actually finishing the testing that I said I was going to do after this. So that one will be a quick follow on. We are finally finishing the Minecraft performance series. One final note before we jump in. This game, and actually all my projects, are available to download on itch if you want to just, run them or play them. But also, they are free, open source, MIT license, and they are here on GitLab. So if you have Git installed, or even if you don't, you can go check out the source code there. These are two resources that I always have linked in the description, but I sometimes forget to talk about. Something to note, if you are going to download this for yourself, I'm going to go ahead and do that and set up a new directory. I did have someone reach out to me and basically said, hey, none of your code works when I download it. It does, but I actually use git submodules. So you're going to want to run this command after you download the code, and that will set up a few of the things that I have in there. So I have an FPS counter, a logger, and a console. So I did the upgrade in Godot Beta 1, but I actually am on Beta 3 right now as I'm running the tests. So let's run this one more time just to show how this works. If you have an existing Godot 3 project, you're going to want to open it in Godot 4. When you click open, it will give you the option import and edit, and it'll ask this, do you want to convert the full project? So I click yes, and it gives you a warning and you want to back up. Obviously I'm using version control. So here we are, and then go ahead, and that was a full backup. It was super duper quick. So if I hit edit, it jumps me straight into the game. So step 1 is going to be getting this to compile. And unfortunately, I have these add-ons here, and that takes a lot of time. So I'm going to mostly skim through this. I'm going to jump to the part when this is fully working. But there are 3 things I wanted to highlight here that, I don't know, may or may not bother other people. The first one is, if you are using anyone else's code, you're going to have to deal with that. So I am using a console from this guy, Quentin Caffino, and it's great, but it is not available in Godot 4 yet, as far as I can tell. I'm going to be fully upgrading my base game template later, so I'm not worrying about this too much, but I do need it to compile. So here we are in Godot 3.5, and unfortunately, there is a little bit of weirdness in the source code. I have never seen this before in I think I've been coding for at least a decade. I've never seen this before, so I don't know what he's doing, but I have to fix it because I'm upgrading the code myself. So my genius solution was just to get rid of that, which of course only works so far. At least it makes the red highlighting go away, and that's all I really wanted. So that fixed that one. The second issue that we have, so back in Godot 3, I am trying to call multiple functions chained together. This is known as the builder pattern. And so I'm trying to call a set of functions chained together, and for the upgrader doesn't recognize that I am cutting this line onto a new line, and so instead it is appending the word super because it thinks I'm calling my own base class. So that needs to be deleted in order for these to work. The third issue I ran into, there are to-dos in your code if you use setters and getters. We're going to find to-do converter 4.0. So here we are, we have a setter and a getter. And again, in Godot 3, here's what that would look like. Var enabled, bool setGet, set enabled, get enabled. And these functions, set enabled and get enabled, are defined down here. In Godot 4, it has inline setters and getters. And so we have a to-do that tells you that these contents need to be taken out of there and pasted up there. I think I did that backwards. That was the set. Anyways, so that needs to be done manually. And if you don't do that, you just assume that everything works, you will not have code that compiles. So look for to-dos. There are some that are put in by the converter, and all of these setters and getters need to be fixed. So now I'm going to do the baking show thing and pull over the new version. So this is for beta 3, and it is working. If I hit play, it'll run. And I'm going to talk about the changes that were made to the actual game to get it to work, not just the changes made to fixing code and the add-on folder. The first one, which is extremely exciting, are the fonts. Jump over here to the main menu. These fonts used to be in Godot 3 defined by a font file. That is still the case, but things look a little different. Here I go, I have some text. This is my little Minecraft, whatever that's called, thing that they have in the main menu that will jump around and say something funny. So I have that here. And let's say I want to change the font color. Previously, what I would have had to do is I would have had to come down to fonts. I don't actually have one here. I need to go and I need to define a theme override font. I need to grab a font file. They actually have font variations now as well, so I think you can modify fonts a little differently. But if you look below here, font size. This exists as its own parameter that is not contained within the font file. Same thing with font color. I think color you may have had before, but here's my outline size. I have that black shadow. I can change the size of this. I can change the color of the font, and I can also change the font size. And all of those are done without modifying the font file. So that's huge. Here we are with a completely different set of font parameters, but the same underlying font file. So that was a nice change. Broke some things. The other one was the menu. Now I actually had to scale this 2 and 2. If we go to 1 and 1, it is only at 50% scale. And I don't know why that happened on import. If you're starting a game from scratch, shouldn't be a problem. So I just did that and it mostly fixed it. I had to resize some other things. The final one was these buttons down here decided to break. They are sharing a button group and that didn't copy over. So a bunch of little things, but when you go in, you click one button, you see the other one unselects. So those just had to be fixed. It wasn't too much pain, but your GUIs will not look good when you first transfer it over to Godot 4. My player movement broke in the upgrade, and the reason why is Godot 4 uses Radians, Godot 3 used degrees. Again, the upgrade tool did half the work for me. It converted it so anytime you are calling a rotate function, it adds in degrees to radians because it assumes you are working in degrees. That is a valid assumption. Unfortunately, I did some math at a few points where I was adding or subtracting values, and that math also needed to be converted. It didn't know that, and so I was not moving as I should. Now I have menus that are working, code that's compiling, a player that moves, and a world that looks terrible. So that's going to be the next step, is figuring this out. Now I'm going to go back real quick to Godot 3. I made a choice back then that ended up taking about 10 minutes of the video and was a huge pain in the rear end. For Godot, they decided to use 64-bit numbers, which means that if you ask the question, can Godot handle my number? Is it going to be too big? The answer is almost always, don't worry about it. The largest number in Godot is this, it's huge. The problem is when you are trying to worry about memory. Most people don't need to care about memory for smaller projects, but if you're doing something like infinitely generated voxel terrain, you probably want to make sure that every bit is being used. So I switched to a pooled byte array, and this was a whole thing. It turns out Godot gives you 1 gigabyte of memory for all shared pooled space. This is just a weird decision they made, but it's 1 gigabyte and that's it. So I had to actually convert my pooled memory back to normal memory when I was done with it, which was really annoying because I was using 8 times the memory space for no reason, other than the engine didn't let me do better. So I thought this was going to be a big deal going forward, and it turns out, no, they just fixed that. So We now no longer have pooled arrays. We have packed arrays, and the major difference is they are no longer passed by value, which means my code here to create new ones by simply assigning the value of the old one doesn't work anymore. So I had to add a duplicate call to that. I forgot that I had types and flags, so I only duplicated, I think, the flags first, and then spent more time trying to figure out why the world looks so weird, and then finally realized I needed to do this to both of them. So that fixed that. Another great thing, I had this depool function before that would convert everything back to standard arrays, which took time and took more memory than it needed to because I didn't have enough resources. Well, now I can get rid of that. So we're still going to delete the flags array because we need to rebuild it every time we break a block. That's just something that I could make the code a lot more complex to optimize if this is actually, making Minecraft, but for this benchmarking tool thing, it's just fine to just regenerate the entire chunk. So we get rid of that, but we keep the other one, and we don't need to change the array into any larger point. So it's going to be really interesting to compare the size of that data. The other major part, though, which again is a huge improvement, but it did require some work on my part, was the way noise happens. I was actually using a fixed seed in Godot 3. I changed that to be a random seed, so it's a little more consistent between the two when I'm doing testing. Here we are with my biome noise, just picking one of these. This is a open simplex noise. You'll see you have seed, octaves, period, persistence, lacularity, and you can change these values and it changes the way things work. In Godot 4, this is really nice. I love this. There's a fast noise light instead of open simplex noise. And if you want open simplex noise, you come down, you have simplex, simplex smooth, cellular, Perlin, value cubic, value. So there's way more options for noise. Another thing, you can visualize in 2D or 3D. I think that's 2D. And that's 3D. The difference is we have frequency here. In Godot 3, we had period. In Godot 4, we have frequency. So I had to use divide by 1 to convert between those. The other numbers I copied over. It didn't look exactly the same. I'm not sure which one is the equivalent to open simplex noise. I thought it was Perlin. Maybe it's simplex. I just chose Perlin, and then I went ahead and copied the numbers over from Godot 3 and then tweaked them a little bit to get a world that looked pretty close. It may not have been exactly the same. So that's noise, copying over. And again, if you're starting a new project from scratch, this is awesome. There's so many more options. It's just a little bit of a pain if my entire project was based on noise and that noise didn't copy over. The other change, most of my types worked out of the box. The one big thing that changed was for mesh type. So to recap, here are my chunk variants. I have a few different things. The one that was the most stable and consistent Godot 3 was the mesh. This is the way that a real Minecraft works. So if I go ahead and I try to use a mesh and I try to do what I was doing before in Godot 3, I get these two kind of cryptic things. Required virtual methods must be overridden before calling. That is kind of confusing. I don't know how to override a virtual method on a class that already exists. Well, it turns out if you come in here and look at this, there are more kinds of meshes now. There's an immediate mesh and an array mesh. And I believe the way these work is the immediate mesh creating geometry manually. I think what that means is you can modify things in real time. And so if you are making something and changing that around through code, you use that. The other one is an array mesh. That's what I actually want to use. So what I was doing in Godot 3 using a basic mesh, I now need to change this to array mesh. And when I do that, now it will generate the world using meshes that then are passed into a surface tool. And once they're created, they're static. So that's how this works. Again, I probably could rewrite this to use immediate meshes, which I guess can be modified by adding and removing points. That is something I don't currently have the capability of in this game, so I'm not planning on adding it, but it's just something to note there. So now let's talk about textures. This has changed quite a bit. In Godot 3, let's say, first off, I have a number of 2D textures here. These are all coming out of this one image, texture smash PNG. You can see this over here. The way that you are going to fix these textures is to go into the image, go into import, and the first thing you want to do is turn off the filter mode. If I re-import that, things are going to look a lot clearer, but still a little funny. That's because there's also a compression mode for pixel art in particular. You want to make this lossless, so every pixel is exactly what you wanted it to be. And here we go, I cleaned that up. So if I come over here into 3D, it's the exact same thing. I'm going to open up this texture that we're borrowing from. These ones are my grid map blocks, so they use a different texture called grid map PNG. Again, filter mode, change, re-import. Things look better, but not great. Compression mode, lossless. And now they are exactly as I want them to be. Let's head over to Godot 4 and see how that works. So I have, again, we're in 2D. We have these textures. I'm going to go ahead and open up the mesh, go to import settings, and there's no setting for that. Yeah, this has completely changed. What you're going to want to do is actually come here within the scene itself. I'm going to open up the texture. Here in the inspector, I come down to texture filter, and I can select nearest. And now we see we are picking the nearest neighbor. That is going to be annoying to have to do for every single one. So thankfully they provided an option here. I go up to project settings and I go to textures, default texture filter. We're going to set this to nearest, and then we're going to close that out. And every single texture has been imported now as pixel art. So that is the way to do it in 2D. If I come to 3D, it would be great if there was a setting, but there currently isn't one. So we're going to have to do this manually per texture. I'm just going to do one or two of these. I did them all, so we'll do baking show style again. You actually see there are new kinds of shaders here. So this is a standard shader material, and I already have this textures here. It's been imported properly, but as part of the upgrade, we need to make this look better. So I'm going to scroll down to sampling, and the filter mode, we're going to change it to nearest. And that cleans that right up. So I'm going to do this with the, I think glass is going to be quite obvious. Come down in the material shader itself, sampling, filter mode, nearest. And there we go, that's been fixed. So that's the way textures work in Godot 4, and it is a little bit of a change from what I'm used to. The final thing that was an awesome upgrade, I thought, was the world environment. So here we are in the game. I'm going to delete these two nodes to show this off. So if I go ahead and run the game, here's the world. I have a light on my character for caves, but other than that, we are in this dark gray sky, no clouds, no real shadows, no nothing. This is the default environment, and you want to add a world environment node. That has been made much easier with these two buttons. You click here, you have preview sun and preview environment. So if I go to sun color, I change this to say, I don't know, bright yellow. Actually, let's go pink. Let's make this really unique. Go to sky color. We're going to make the sky green, and we're going to make it really vibrant. So here's my sun and here's my sky. I'm going to make the ground bright blue. I just want these to be visible. And you have all these other settings in here. There's just a few settings, but these are the most important ones. If I click add to scene and add to scene, these were just added. So here in the environment, I have all of these options that I can go through. And I don't necessarily know what all the options do. I don't know which options are important to select, but it doesn't matter because I can just use that and add it into the scene. So if I hit play, this is going to be ugly, but it shows off. This is a purple sun, a green sky, and a blue ground. And all of that was just added in. That is ugly. But all that was added in just by changing those couple of settings and clicking add. So I'm going to back that out and put back the ones that I had, which look a little better. But yeah, that is just super convenient that you can just go and add to scene and add to scene. And that is how you get your world environment set up. So a lot more options to look into, but for me, I was just trying to replicate what I have in Godot 3, and I think I succeeded, and maybe it's a little better. With that said, would I recommend upgrading a project to Godot 4? If you're happy with what you have, probably just stick with Godot 3. It works great, and a lot of the changes, you're not going to miss them unless you've already started using them. I'd say making this game up to this point was about 100 hours, and remaking the game in Godot 4 was about 10, so 10% of the time. And a part of that may have come from me having the add-ons folder, but my rule of thumb going forward is going to be, if I am not willing to remake the game from scratch in Godot 4, I'm probably not going to try upgrading that game to Godot 4. I don't think it would be worth the hassle. So yeah, that's my take on it. If you are curious, feel free to make a copy of your game, try upgrading it, see if it takes a lot of time or a little time, but for me, that's going to be the rule of thumb going forwards, is expected to take 10% of the time you've already spent, and a lot of my projects are going to just stay Godot 3 projects. I will be starting new projects in Godot 4 going forward, and I will be upgrading my base game template. Again, I may make a video about that if anything interesting happens there. So that was everything. I am now upgraded to Godot 4. I'm going to be working on my unit tests going forward. I actually invested probably a couple weeks into just run and break fixing the unit tests, so that video is on its way. I have all the tests run. I'm just analyzing the data currently. I may also rerun them for beta 4, which will probably drop before I'm done with the video, but it is a very fast follow this time. I will have a link on screen to jump to the next video, and I will see you there. Thank you for watching.